Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by the generosity of the following companies. The Old Mill Press, publishing beautifully crafted books that illuminate our world. To learn more, visit theoldmillpress.com. And by listeners like you.
This is animator Ron Husband, and you're listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock Podcast. Proceed at your own risk, and mark well me words, mateys. Dead men tell no tale.
Welcome back to another edition of Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, and music, as well as what's streaming, what's playing in theaters, and what's happening in this universe of entertainment. I'm Al John Go, musician and longtime Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, and pop culturist, and big fan. You can email me, Aljon, A-L-J-O-N, at skullrockpodcast.com.
And I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, author, and welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com. Aljon, another week. It's just, we're barreling towards the middle of February already. Where is this year going?
I can't believe it, Dave. I can't believe we're, knee deep in February. I don't know where the time is going. I feel like it's just getting faster and faster and faster, but, we're here for it. And, I'm so grateful that our listeners are here for it too.
Yeah, no, and, we have another great show. I guess it would have been last week. I put up on my Facebook page that Joe Hale, the producer of The Black Cauldron, had passed away. Yeah. And, a lot of people were, my condolences, and I'm so sad and everything. Guess what, folks? He was 99. What an incredible life. And we're going to celebrate that today, Aljon, because we are going to run our interview with Joe Hale, which happened to have been the first interview that we did for the Skull Rock Podcast in October of 2020 when we kicked off this podcast.
I can't believe it, Dave. Where has this time gone?
Yeah, and, I kind of feel like, we have a global reach now with this podcast. We've got people sending us notes from all over the world, and we've got a big listener base. And I thought it would be appropriate, not only because I knew Joe and I thought he was a really great person, but because he was kind enough to come on and be our first interview on the Skull Rock Podcast. And so I feel like maybe a lot of people might not have heard that podcast because we had just started, and so we're going to run that today as a tribute to producer Joe Hale, who was also a layout artist and, had worked at Disney for decades, had an incredible career. And by the way, started at Disney after World War II, and during World War II, he survived the Battle of Iwo Jima.
Unbelievable.
One of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific during World War II. Yeah. Joe Hale was there, Yeah. And not only did he survive that, Aljon, he survived Jeffrey Katzenberg at Disney.
Oh, man. He certainly did. I mean, and what a gentleman. I found it such an honor and a privilege to have these guests on our show to share their story. But someone the likes of Joe Hale, who'd, been a survivor of so many things in this life, not to mention, besides being a war hero and veteran, but just being part of the Disney that we want to be so attached to. I know a lot of our fans just yearn for, going back through time and trying to reach out and feel a connection to the classic Walt Disney Company. And Joe was certainly that bridge for me, because he lived through so many during that era, so much stuff during that era. And I feel like a lot of our guests do that, but it was certainly a privilege and an honor to talk to him and have him on our show. And it's great to have this memorial, in tribute to him. So it's great.
And I don't even want to call it a memorial. I want to call it a celebration.
Yes, a tribute.
It's a celebration of his life, a tribute to his life, because if we can all get to 99, we've lived a good life.
No doubt.
Absolutely,
Dave. And you know what's great is that I find that you consider him a mentor, because you came in at the time, you were working on that film, and you're integral to that film, and it's great.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Well, I mean, that was my first picture. I was starting out in the business, I was getting my sea legs.
You were getting your sea legs, but I tell you, man, a lot of that animation and that stuff in there, you're definitely a part of, and it's great that we're able to document it. So I'm looking forward to revisiting this interview with Joe, and thank you so much for your contributions. You will be missed. I tell you what, we have some listener email. Can you believe it?
Skull Rock Podcast answers your email.
It's great, Dave, that we're everywhere where people listen. We have a choice everywhere in podcast world, and now, of course, on YouTube. And Deborah Moses says, Joe Hale is very much still loved and is great. Loved the interview, revisiting it upon a word of his death. It's great that people kind of go back and seeked out the Joe Hale interview on YouTube.
No, I think it's great. And there's also some comments on Facebook. Erica says, great episode. Looking forward to the Animation Y'all Festival.
Oh, yeah.
Darlie, who's been a guest on the show, she said, worked with Tony, but I just love Tom. Wonderful guy, terrific animator. For fun, asked Tony which one of them is better. I love that.
Oh, just stirring up the pot, Darlie. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And we had another comment from Pam. That was a fun podcast. So, just love getting those comments from our listeners when they have a chance to send us a note on social media or through an email. So keep it up. We appreciate it.
Chicago Paul 76 on YouTube says, came over from listening to Dave's frequent visits, connecting with Walt. Absolutely love this podcast, especially how Dave assumes the listener doesn't know what he knows, but doesn't talk down to the listener. Like when a guest uses a term for something that an outsider may not understand, he'll have the guest take a moment to explain. Keep introducing us more and more to these legends.
Awesome. I love it.
It's so cool.
And something, to me, these interviews are not only an oral history of animation, but it's educational for people who are listening. And so anytime somebody does use some terminology that we use frequently in the industry, I always want the guest to explain what that is, so our listeners have a full understanding. Exactly. And it's certainly not talking down. It's just being informative.
Yeah, I mean, I learned so much, and it's great to hear the explanation of these insider terms. I think that's the coolest thing about it, is that we get a little peek behind the curtain, as we promise every single week, and we deliver with these interviews. Paul 329869, boy, that's a name, on YouTube says, wow, I just came to this video to revisit the great Mark Hausler, the first of many parts, and this is on the Mark Hausler, My Road to Disney. So he has a very unique story to tell about how he came into Disney, so that's pretty awesome that you check that out. Gang, once again, thank you so much. Feel free to find us, seek us out on every podcast platform, including YouTube. Leave us those comments. You can even check out and leave us voicemails in our show notes. Just click the link to leave us a message, and that voicemail will go straight to our inbox, and we'll play it in an upcoming episode. Now, Dave, it's time for our picks of the week. What's been going on, Dave?
Well, I got to tell you, Aljon, I did see a couple of movies. I'll start with Dogman. I went to see Dogman. And you're familiar with Dogman, right?
I am.
It's a series of children's books,
Yes.
which is fabulous. And the movie is. I'll give you the synopsis. When a police officer and his faithful police dog get injured in the line of duty, a harebrained but life-saving surgery fuses the two of them together, and Dogman is born. As Dogman learns to embrace his new identity, he must stop feline supervillain Petey the cat from cloning himself and going on a crime spree. I thought this movie was funny, hilarious, ridiculous. Just a great animation romp. As far as I'm concerned, I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's certainly a children's movie, I think, but I think it played well to the adults. Rotten Tomato gives it 80%. Fandango gives it 85%. Pete Davidson plays or voices Petey. Lou Rel plays the chief. And Ricky Gervais plays Flippy the fish. And I thought, you know what? This was just absolutely a fun movie to watch. If you don't see it in the theaters, check it out when it comes on the streaming service.
Love it.
I also went to the movie theater to see Paddington in Peru, which they were doing sort of early screenings of because it opens wide on February 14th. So it was a preview screening I got to see. When Paddington discovers his beloved aunt has gone missing from the home for retired bears, he and the Brown family head to the jungles of Peru to find her. Determined to solve the mystery, they soon stumble across a legendary treasure as they make their way through the rainforests of the Amazon. Have you seen the previous Paddington movies?
I enjoyed it. I think
I love them.
I think they're so warm to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it reminds me of like the Winnie the Pooh movie that Disney did with Ewan McGregor. It's got a lot of heart, I think.
Yeah, no, and it's a great cast. Emily Mortimer as Mrs. Brown. Ben Whishaw is Paddington. He voices Paddington Bear. Olivia Colman plays the Reverend Mother. It's just a really terrific cast in here. Hugh Bonneville plays Henry Brown. I think a lot of people might remember Hugh Bonneville from oh gosh, now it just slipped my mind. What was the series that was at the big estate in England?
Talking about Downton Abbey?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Hugh Bonneville from Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
So I want to tell you this was a fun movie. I think that the animation of Paddington Bear, for the most part, is really well done. It's incredibly well integrated into the live action. There was only a couple of scenes where I felt the animation could have been better than what was put into the film, but that's just me being hypercritical. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 93%. IMDb gives it 6.8 out of 10. I think Rotten Tomatoes is better with the 93% because it really is, I think, a terrific movie. When it opens wide, check out Paddington in Peru. On the small screen, I visited with The Recruit on Netflix, which dropped season 2. And this is about a fledgling CIA lawyer who gets caught up in a dangerous game of international politics when a former asset threatens to expose the nature of her relationship with the agency unless they clear her name. Noah Centineo plays Owen Hendricks, the lead. It's a great ensemble cast. I'm enjoying this season 2, so check that out. Rotten Tomatoes only gives a 68%. IMDb gives a 7.4. I'd probably go more with the IMDb rating, 7.4 out of 10. But check that out on Netflix. Over on Hulu is, I should say, it's actually on Max, but you can watch it on Hulu, is The Pit. And I think I mentioned this. This is Noah Wyle. The show is about a realistic examination of the challenges facing healthcare workers in America, as seen through the lens of the frontline heroes working in a modern day hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So it's basically the emergency room of the, and again, a terrific ensemble cast. I think this series has a real heart to it. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 93%. IMDb gives it 8.3 out of 10. If you haven't seen this, check it out. The Pit with Noah Wyle on Max, but you can also check it out on Hulu. Now, Aljon, I've talked about Rogue Heroes before, and season 2 is absolutely fantastic. I would go on to say that season 2 is even better than season 1.
Ooh.
And I think that this is a fantastic series. It is so well done. During World War II, eccentric young officer David Sterling is hospitalized in Cairo after a training exercise accident. Bored, he starts thinking that the accepted war methods are wrong and hits on a radical plan. He fights for permission to recruit the toughest, boldest, and brightest soldiers for a small undercover unit that will create mayhem behind enemy lines. More rebels than soldiers, Sterling's team are every bit as complicated, flawed, and reckless as they are astonishingly brave and heroic. This is kind of loosely based on the Special Air Services, the SAS during World War II. Is a British group. They were sort of like, I would call them almost mercenaries, because it was no holds barred. They went behind enemy lines and created mayhem and havoc as directed. Jack O'Connell stars as Lieutenant Patty. And I got to tell you, he is unbelievable. I mean, just an incredible English actor who his performance in season 2 is off the charts. I highly recommend this. It's an MGM original, MGM Plus original. But you can also, you can see it on Amazon Prime and the Roku channel as well. So check this out if you get a moment. Rogue Heroes. If you haven't seen this, by the way, watch season 1 and then season 2, because season 2 is just fantastic. It is so well done. I can't speak more highly about this than I have been. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 100%.
Oof.
100%. IMDb gives it an 8.1 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I just think it's incredible. Now, over on Amazon Prime, I watched a couple of episodes of a new show called Wild Cards.
Okay.
And IMDb gives it a 7.1 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes gives it 100%. Demoted Detective Ellis has unfortunately spent the last year on the maritime unit, while Max has been living a transient life, elaborately scamming everyone she meets. However, when Max gets arrested and ends up helping Ellis solve a local crime, the two are offered the opportunity to redeem themselves, with Ellis becoming a detective again and Max staying out of jail. The catch: they must work together, with each using their unique skills to solve crimes. For Ellis, that means hard-boiled shoe leather police work. For Max, it means accents, schemes, and generally befriending everyone in sight while driving Ellis absolutely nuts. The two will have to learn what it means to trust another person and maybe actually become partners. I'm having difficulty getting through this because it's kind of a generic cop show. You know,
right?
It's very, very formulaic. It's shot up in Vancouver. The first couple episodes, I'm starting to warm up a little bit, so I'm going to give it more of a chance because, typically with these new shows, like the first episode or two, they're just trying to get their act together. They're trying to find their sea legs, so to speak. Yeah. But I will say the two leads have good chemistry, and that's helping. So Wild Cards, you can check that out. Honestly, I'm shocked that Rotten Tomatoes gives it 100%. I think IMDb is probably closer with a 7.1.
There you go.
So that's what I've been watching. Al John, what have you been watching?
All right, Dave, for the first time in a long, long time, I saw a movie in IMAX, and that would happen to be Becoming Led Zeppelin, The Monsters of Rock.
I cannot wait to see this.
Yeah, funny thing, Dave.
Yes.
Our company, the company I work for, my day job, works a lot with Jimmy Page these days. And, it just so happened we went on a field trip. We just all decided to go. I
think it's awesome. And the Gibson guitars were featured throughout, right?
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This film, it's called Becoming Led Zeppelin. You can experience it at IMAX. Of course, big documentary, which dives into the rise of the epochal rock group, which is the only documentary of its kind the band themselves have participated in. The documentary includes new interviews with Jimmy Page, Robert Plant, John Paul Jones, as well as rare archival interviews with the band's late drummer, John Bonham. It's amazing. So this is Sony Pictures documentaries directed by Bernard McMahon and written by Bernard and Alison McGarty. And the band sits down, talks about each individual's upbringing in a great way. They kind of speed run you through who these people are, how they'd met, what part of their lives they were at. Robert Plant was, he was struggling. He was the epitome of a struggling musician. And by that time, John Paul Jones was already a prodigy, playing in church, head of his church choir at a tender age of like 16.
Wow.
And 17 years old, he's already getting gigs, and he's a studio musician on call. He plays organ. He plays these different instruments, multi-instrumentalist, super talented. Jimmy Page was coming up, playing in talent shows. All of a sudden, also becomes a noteworthy guitar player, playing all kinds of great sessions for all kinds of great musicians and great players, and then being, joining in a session with John Paul Jones. And then, of course, Robert Plant and John Bonham hooked up, playing in bands together. It was just a great meeting, and how they, found each other and played these festivals and started working on their record right before they, and hearing and seeing them kind of sit down and listen to an interview with their late drummer, John Bonham, that has never been aired before. And seeing the look on their faces as it's almost as if he was in the room and they were just talking, and the look and expression captured on their face of a friend they hadn't heard from in 40 years or so, 50 years almost. It's heartwarming.
How long ago did the drummer die?
John died in 1980.
Wow. How did he die?
I want to say that he had I think it was alcohol related. Okay.
So it was like a drug or alcohol related type of death.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll go back in and I'll verify.
I didn't realize he had died that long ago.
Yeah, when they did Live Aid,
Yeah.
Phil Collins joined him on that. He wasn't there for that. He'd already passed.
Okay.
He already passed.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's absolutely amazing. And that's, some of the coolest takeaways is seeing this footage, seeing them react to the footage, because they actually pull back the camera and see them listening to the interview with John, watching footage of them playing these festivals where there was a smattering of people there when they were touring the United States for the first time, and seeing the looks and reactions on people's faces when they're playing these monstrous riffs from Led Zeppelin 1 and 2, and people are just looking, and kids in the crowd have their fingers to their ears because it's so stinking loud, and these people are looking around like going, what am I listening to? What am I seeing here? And then Wolfman Jack on the radio, dig, is over there talking about all this stuff they're doing, and Led Zeppelin on the radio in Los Angeles, California. And then calling up, it's like, oh my gosh, Robert Plant, you're such a fox. And Robert Plant is going, oh, that's very nice of you. What is a fox? And it's like, you just look amazing, Robert. Just keep on doing what you're doing. Can't wait to see you there at the Fillmore or whatever. And it's like,
who's left out of the Led Zeppelin? Is it just Robert Plant and Jimmy Page?
They're all still alive except for John, except
for the drummer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're all still alive, and they really rarely play together anymore.
Yeah.
For various reasons.
Is there just friction between them?
I don't know. I think they've moved on.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think Robert Plant lives in town, and he lives in Nashville, and he records a lot with Alison Krauss and has been doing that. And, Jimmy still lives in London and is remastering. Led Zeppelin's really kind of his thing. He is the engine behind this monstrous band, and I love how they got their name. It'll go over like a lead balloon, right? I mean, it's just a tongue-in-cheek, the one of the greatest bands after the Beatles, in my opinion. Just an amazing story, and I saw it in IMAX, and it's great. Gang, if you love Led Zeppelin, if you love classic rock, you'll love it, just because there's so much to discover. Footage you've never seen, music, live tracks you've never heard before, unearthed interviews with John Bonham. I mean, what else can I say? It's great. Go out there and check it out. Becoming Led Zeppelin.
Awesome. You sold me. I'm going to go see it.
And also, you got to think, they didn't even cover the band at Led Zeppelin 4 with Stairway to Heaven, and the song remains the same, and all those different things that happened and the tragedy. You would think that there's another part of this story left to be told. So I can't wait. Another thing that I couldn't wait for is my new favorite Disney Plus show, which is The Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It's on Disney Plus. This, once again, follows the Peter Parker on his way to becoming Spider-Man with his freshman year in high school, unlike anything you've ever seen before. And I love the cel-shaded 1960s era type of animation. The characters literally come to life, lifted off the page of the comic books of 1963 in that era. Coleman Domingo is one of my favorite actors from Fear the Walking Dead. He voices Norman Osborn. Houston Thames as Peter Parker does a great job. The voice cast is incredible. Give it a shot. I think you'll appreciate the fact that this is telling kind of new stories in a way. And I will say that while it's targeted toward younger viewers, I wouldn't target it. I wouldn't necessarily screen it for my youngest kids, because it does have some of that edge that we see in Spider-Man, that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse type of stuff. There's some kind of adult themes in there. So it's definitely more of a PG type of animated show. So if you have little ones, maybe don't do that.
Okay. All right.
Because I'm seeing it in advance before I show it to my kids, because they love Spider-Man too. But there's some really cool twists. It's well written in my opinion. So check out Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man if you're a big fan of the webbed wall crawler. That is what I've been watching. That's what Dave's been watching. We appreciate it. Feel free to leave us the feedback and let us know what you've been watching, and maybe we'll check it out in a future episode.
Skull Rock Podcast. This week in Disney and pop culture.
All right, Dave. Box office vindication. Mufasa passes up Sonic 3 in the U.S. and heads for a $7 million global gross.
700
million. I'm sorry. I missed a few zeros. 700 million.
Yeah, if it was 7 million, that would be a disaster.
It would be a disaster. You're right. 700 million, Dave. That's right. I left a few zeros out. But many wrote off Barry Jenkins' prequel, Mufasa, after its muted Christmas opening. But the Disney film has enjoyed historic staying power. And that's great. You know, it's good to see. I did not necessarily see the motivation to seek this film out. It wasn't like one of my first, but after seeing that word of mouth is doing this film really well, I am compelled to go see it now. And I really appreciated their live-esque action take on the Lion King, CGI generated lions and all. So I'm curious to see how this one pans out.
Awesome.
Yeah. Also in there, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which our kids love Sonic. It follows up at $232.7 million in sales. It's doing really well in the box office as well. Millions and millions. And then let's see here. Jon Favreau's Lion King. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's about it. Let's talk about the Grammy winners, Dave. You know, when we recorded, it was the day of the Grammys.
Yeah.
But now here we are. Kendrick Lamar won Record of the Year, Song of the Year for Not Like Us. Chappell Rowan took home Best New Artist, while Beyonce scored Album of the Year for her country-themed album, Cowboy Carter. Of course, Beyonce led the noms with her album, followed by Lamar, Charlie XCX, Billie Eilish, Post Malone, each with 7. Meanwhile, Sabrina Carpenter, Chappell Rowan, and Taylor Swift were close behind with 6 each. You know, I mean, the best country album goes to Cowboy Carter by Beyonce. A quite controversial move in my circles because I do live in Music City, and it's not because the album wasn't good. It's just because of the competition she had. And she had some serious competition for country music record of the year. You know, Post Malone, Casey Musgraves, Chris Stapleton, Lainey Wilson. And I can tell you, all those records were great. I didn't necessarily feel Cowboy Carter was the best of that bunch. When you have Casey Musgraves, a very pop country, but she's amazing. Lainey Wilson, Chris Stapleton, nothing against Post Malone, but man, Chris Stapleton, hard to, I mean, come on, it's Chris Stapleton.
But you know, Aljon, I think sometimes with these awards, there's sort of a sense of, you know, this was the elusive Grammy for Beyonce. You know, the album of the year. She hadn't won that one, and she's won the most Grammys of any recording artist, right? So, you know, this was an elusive award for her. And do you feel like the voting members of the Grammys were like, oh, let's give it to her this time?
You know, I think the voting members of the Grammys, I mean, we know that I don't think it's a secret that there's a fix in these awards.
I think I agree with you.
You know, I mean, the music industry is full of slots that are bought and paid for, gang. Come on.
Yeah.
You know, they're bought and paid for. It's a total PR move. There's a lot of money behind who wins and who wins. I love Sabrina Carpenter too. I think she tries too hard. I think she's a great artist. I think she tries too hard. But I can tell you that she is not a newcomer. You know, she's recorded like 6 albums before. And then you deem her as a best new artist. You know, that makes no sense to me. You know, best new artist after being in the industry for 12, 15 years. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, and now you're going to change the rules and say, oh, it's just when they were recognized or when they are breakout success. Then call it best breakout artist, best new artist. It's ridiculous. But you know, and I'm in the music industry, Dave. It's like we've seen it. So it's a little bit of a joke to an extent, but regardless, it's not a dig on Beyonce, but I do believe that if it's almost like she didn't earn it. If you're going to give it to her because it's eluded her all of her life, and you as an organization decide, oh, we're just going to give it to her, is it really earned then? Is it really earned when you have albums the likes of the other artists that are so well deserving of it? It's kind of like, it devalues the whole thing. But anyway, that's just me.
No, I listen. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you're involved in it in your own in your way, in your neck of the woods. So, speaking of,
so I think sometimes with these awards, there's a groundswell within the membership to give an award to somebody for it's recognition of a body of work as opposed to the individual thing that's being up for consideration.
I get that. I get that, and I will say, I think, when it comes to the rock records category, as much as I love Beatles and the Stones and all these great bands, come on, let's get a little contemporary here and get out of ourselves so much and get some other rock bands that are well deserving in this category.
The Beatles didn't the Beatles song win something?
At
the Grammys?
I'm looking through the. I think they won for best. What was it? I'm looking here, Dave.
Yeah, I think it had to be, something to do with the song that was remastered that they put together.
Yeah, it was just they
won a Grammy in some category for that.
Yeah, probably like best mix or something like that. I have to check out the complete list, but yeah. Anyway, we'll go back in and we'll take a look at some of this stuff. But
Aljon, over the weekend, there was the Annie Awards, which honors animation, and the Producers Guild Awards.
Yeah, so we can talk about the Annie Awards. Wild Robot, we talked about, sweeps its categories with 9 wins, including Best Feature. In the TV media category, Arcane won all 7 awards for which it was nominated. Dave, you've seen a lot of these films, if not every one.
Listen, I've been saying for a while that The Wild Robot, to me, is the best animated feature film of 2024. And it got 10 Annie nominations. One of there was 2. They got nominated twice in one category. So you could only have one winner. So that's why they got 9. They swept 9 awards. So basically they won every category they were nominated in, including Best Director for Animated Feature. And I still say to this day, The Wild Robot is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, go check it out.
It's amazing.
And by the way, Wild Robot also won a People's Choice Award. It's picking up awards left and right. And at the Producers Guild, it won Best Animated Feature Film Producer at the Producers Guild. So it's just every awards show, it seems to be picking up awards.
Well, there you go. Some of the other highlights, other than that, we had Best Independent Feature with Flow.
Yeah,
you've seen that, and best.
I have.
Oh, yeah, best special production, Orion in the Dark. Best short subject, Wander to Wonder. Let's see, best sponsored, Fuzzy Feelings. Best TV media and preschool category, The Tiny Chef Show. Nick. Best TV media goes to Marvel's Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. I really like that series as well. Best TV media, Dave, one of your favorites, Bob's Burgers.
Bob's Burgers.
Another
we
Disney,
love Bob's Burgers.
Yeah, 20th Century and Disney. Best TV media goes to Dream Productions and Pixar Animation Studio winner. So that's great for Pixar. And then there's a bunch of stuff. Arcane for Best Effects. Adios for Best Student Film. Best Feature goes to Wild Robot, of course, for Best Effects in a feature. And Arcane, Best Character Animation. Man, there's a lot of really good stuff there. Wild Robot, Character Animation. Planet of the Apes for Character Animation Live Action. There you go, Dave.
Yeah, and I saw that, and I have to say, Aljon, if you have not seen it's Planet of the Apes. What is it? What's the full title? Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes. They have Planet of the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Yes, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. I thought was just a fantastic movie last year.
I enjoyed it.
And a huge part of that was the just flawless character animation of the apes. Throughout that. I mean, it just draws you in. It is an incredible extension of the Planet of the Apes franchise that started like a half a century ago, with Charlton Heston and Roddy McDowall.
It's a great evolution. I really love it. And when you see something that takes you out of stories, like I was talking about Mary a couple of weeks ago, the movie Mary. What really took me out of it was the dialogue. There were some portions of dialogue that didn't necessarily fit the time. It felt very Hamilton-esque to me. How it was very contemporary. It didn't really set well with me in that type of setting when you have Anthony Hopkins doing a very kind of Shakespearean, classical style of acting and presentation. And then you had some of the younger actors playing Mary and Joseph being a little bit more contemporary. It was a clash of styles to me, kind of took me out of it. And with the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, everything was so seamless. It felt like we were engulfed in the world, and I really could appreciate that. So, congratulations to all the winners. It's great that the industry does, recognize animators in that respect in so many different fields, and including video games, which is really cool. Yeah. Now, the Producers Guild Awards you mentioned, it says Anora wins top prize en route to the Oscars. The Producers Guild of America named Anora Best Picture of the Year. And this comes a solid 2 hours after Sean Baker took home the DGA's top prize, solidifying Neon Film as the official Oscars frontrunner for Best Picture. And that's really great, Dave. The award ceremony had a bunch of people. Of course, the stars came out: Chris Mandalari, Steve Carell. Of course, the Milestone Award presented by Bob Iger, Taika Waititi in there, presented Norman Lear's Achievement Award in Television. Also, Jon Favreau was in there. So just a bunch of really cool things. Outstanding Producer of Animated Theatrical Motion Pictures was The Wild Robot, Dave.
Of course.
So you had that. Danny Thomas Award for Outstanding Producer of Episodic Comedy Television was Hacks. I don't know if you're familiar with that series.
I love that series with Gene Smart. It's fantastic.
Yeah, there you go. One of our favorites documentaries, Outstanding Producer of Televised Stream Motion Pictures, is The Greatest Night in Pop, which is the We Are the World documentary on Netflix. Which is really cool. So there's a bunch of really cool winners here. Congratulations. I will also put this Outstanding Producer for Documentary Motion Picture goes to Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which I do need to check out. Checked out clips of that. So good stuff there. Dave, a couple days ago, The Lion King at the Hollywood Bowl concert debuts on Disney Plus. I'm bookmarking this. It was kind of low key, something we kind of mentioned in the news a while back. But I love it when Disney does these kind of musical celebrations at the Hollywood Bowl. They really do it up really well. And there's a 70-person orchestra, a bunch of dancers, state-of-the-art projection mapping, which looks amazing, especially with that overhead camera. Lion King turning 30. It's hard to believe, Dave.
They really do a great job at the Hollywood Bowl. I've seen Nightmare Before Christmas several times at the Hollywood Bowl. I've seen The Little Mermaid. I've seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Might have been. Anyway, I've seen a bunch of these at the Hollywood Bowl, and they're just fantastic presentations.
Well, I tell you, it's really great to see a reunion of the original voice cast, including Broadway members too, Lebo M, Jeremy Irons, Nathan Lane, Jason Weaver, Ernie Sabella, Billy Eichner, and Heather Hadley, Bradley Gibson. So many. Jennifer Hudson also joined the event as well, which is really great. So just a star-studded cast, and there you go. James Earl Jones in spirit. So there you have it.
Yeah.
And speaking of spirits, here we have
Obituary Roll Call.
The obituary roll call for this week, Dave. Tony Roberts, Woody Allen sidekick and Broadway stalwart, dies at the age of 85.
95.
95. Wow.
Check it out. I'm pretty sure it was 95 because I saw this come across Hold on a second. Let me see here.
Okay,
I
here.
may be wrong.
It says here, Hollywood Reporter.
It's 85. Guess what? They changed that because it said 95 when it first came out.
Someone had to fact check and fix it real quick.
There you go. 85.
85. Okay. So there you have it. You see, Dave, maybe you're living in a one of those. What was it? The Berenstein Bears situation. What was that? You're living in an alternate reality where the Hollywood Reporter reports 95. But of course, the son of a famous radio announcer, the Annie Holland played against Sam actor, stepped in for Robert Redford in Barefoot in the Park. And Tony Roberts, you may not know the name, but once again, you probably know the face. The face is just, he was all over the place back in the day. Long-running 69 to 70 Broadway hit played against Sam. He portrayed Dick Christie. And of course, in Annie Hall as well. He was also cast in Stardust Memories, A Midsummer Night Sex Comedy, Hannah and Her Sisters, that I remember him in, Radio Days as well. So just a very, very well-seasoned actor. Once again, he'd been in so many things. So, Dave, any other thoughts here before we wrap things up?
No, he just was, he was a seasoned Broadway actor who was in a lot of the Woody Allen movies, but he was also in other things. He did television, he did film, he did Broadway. He was a very versatile actor. He was very funny actor when he needed to be. He just played off of Woody Allen very well. It's he leaves behind, I think, a body of work, and frankly, 85. That kind of seems young to me now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here we are at the point where we talk about our featured guest here. Joe Hale, of course, the animation veteran and Black Cauldron producer, dies at 99. Of course, this was also covered by the Hollywood Reporter. Of course, Joe Hale spent 35 years as an animator and layout artist at Disney, receiving Oscar noms for his work on The Black Hole, as well as his work, of course, in The Black Cauldron. He died of natural causes at his home in Atlasardo. Did I say that? Atasardo, California.
Yeah, it's near Paso Robles.
Paso Robles, okay.
Yeah, it was near. So just to give people a general idea, I visited him at his house a number of times. His wife Beverly is lovely. She actually reached out to me to let me know that Joe passed away peacefully at home, and I will tell you all that he had his wits about him. He lived a very, very good life, a very amazing life, considering, as I said at the top of the show, Aljon, that, he was a Marine and he was at the Battle of Iwo Jima in the South Pacific. The famous battle where there's a monument in Washington, D.C. of the Marines raising the American flag on the top of a hill on the island. And, it was one of the bloodiest battles of World War II in the Pacific. And, he survived that, worked at Disney for 35 years. He survived dealing with Jeffrey Katzenberg when Katzenberg came in and, wanted to re-edit The Black Cauldron and didn't understand animation. He wanted to see all the outtakes that were available, and they had to explain to Jeffrey that there were no outtakes in animation. So anyway, it was, he I think had an amazing life. I think he, exited Disney because of Jeffrey in a less than decent way. But that's just the way this town operates, Yeah. And, I'll put it to you this way. I think Joe was a little bitter about his exit from Disney. I mean, he was basically fired by Jeffrey. So, that's what happens, in this business. But what an incredibly nice guy he was. He was very generous, and I think people are going to hear that in the interview we do with him.
Certainly. It says here, and you do cover it in this interview, is that Hale started out as an in-betweener on Alice in Wonderland in 1951 and worked on Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians, Mary Poppins, The Jungle Book, Fox and the Hound, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, and Pete's Dragon, all of the stuff we grew up watching. And Dave, that you were able to work and come in on at the very start of your career at Disney, post Katzenberg or during the Katzenberg era. It's an interesting story, and I'm glad we're able to tell it here, Dave, and you walk us through his career with him. And as he said, just sharp as a tack. His recall was great. He's able to continue to tell stories, and we're just looking forward to just delving into this interview.
And realize, folks, when we did this interview, Joe was, I believe, 94. So he's and again, when I would go out and visit him at his house, he was very spry. We'd go out in the backyard, and he was he had great recall. I'm very grateful to him because he also gave me a bunch of documentation on Black Cauldron. Oh, wow. Which I have tucked away for a future use. So that was kind of nice.
That is great.
So what an amazing life. I mean, he would have turned 100 sometime this year. And to live that long and to have an incredible life that he had, more power to him, and this interview to me is a celebration of that life.
100%. Well, gang, let's sit back and relax and enjoy this interview. Our very first interview. Let's go back into the time machine to October of 2020. When we sit down and talk to Joe Hale about his life and times right here on Skull Rock Podcast.
Skull Rock Podcast. Interview time.
We are just so honored to have here not only one of the most amazing animators and visual effects people around. He's been nominated for an Academy Award for The Black Hole, one of my favorite films. Also, in animation for Robin Hood, Sleeping Beauty, and of course, the producer of The Black Cauldron that also Dave worked on. Please welcome Joe Hale. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Glad to be here.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Joe. It's Dave. How you doing?
Just doing fine.
So Joe, to start out with, I wanted to kind of put in context for our listeners. This past June, you turned 95 years old.
Yes.
Awesome.
And it's unbelievable. You were born in June of 1925, and you were born in Michigan, but you grew up in Indiana.
No, it's just the opposite. I was born in Indiana.
I grew up in Michigan.
Yeah, I was born in a little town. It wasn't even a town. I looked it up. I Googled it, and it's a parking lot. Literally. It was a
little village.
It was a series of little white one-room shacks along an onion field.
Wow.
And my dad, this was during the Depression. He was wheel hoeing onions, and my mother knew when I was due, so she made sure he was out of the house. And my mother delivered me by herself.
Wow.
And then she waved a blanket or something, and it got my father's attention. And he came in, and she sent him. She said, "Go get your mother." And he went and got his mother, and she came over and helped her clean everything up.
Wow. That's something else.
I lived there till I was 4, and then we moved to Michigan, Chelsea, Michigan, a little town about 15 miles, I think, near Ann Arbor. I think it was east of Ann Arbor. No, west of Ann Arbor.
And I understand that you saw Bambi 7 times in 3 days when it was released.
Yeah, to me, that's still my favorite Disney movie of all time. We looked at it just the other day. I hadn't seen it. I purposely stayed away from it for several years because I wanted to see if it still had that impact. And it sure did. It was, to me, it's still Disney's perfect film.
It's one of those movies that has resonated from generation to generation.
Yes. And I'm going to see it with my two grandnieces. Great-granddaughters.
Great-granddaughters, honey.
Great-granddaughters in a few weeks when things kind of get back to normal.
Oh, good.
I want to see it with them.
With fresh eyes.
I can remember sitting during interviews. I remember this one interview with, I think, Tom Leach was some, I don't remember who the guy was, for some newspaper man or something. And they were interviewing my office and we were talking about art. And I said, well, if I got to talking about Bambi. And I said, if I had to make the choice between saving Bambi, the negative of Bambi, and the Mona Lisa, I know which one I'd take. And
That's awesome.
I remember seeing the guy from publicity going, kind of wincing. But I believe that, and I would.
Well, the Disney animated films are works of art. And every bit as relevant as a painting. But that was when you decided you set your sights on wanting to become a Disney animator.
Well, I never thought that could possibly ever happen. You know what I mean? I didn't think I had anywhere near and I didn't, near the talent to do a Bambi. Or I didn't really even understand animation, and I didn't know the names of any of the animators. I didn't. And so when I started working at Disney, Ollie Johnson and all these names of people who had worked on Bambi were like gods to me.
Yeah. But before we get to you working at Disney, you dropped out of high school in 1943 and you signed up with the Marine Corps because of World War II.
Awesome.
Yes, they were, and they had announced that everybody, when you turned 18, you had to sign up in the register for the draft. But you could tell them you wanted the Navy or Marine Corps or Air Force or whatever, Air Corps, and but you didn't know if you were going to get it or not. So I wanted to make sure I didn't for some reason or other, I didn't want to go in the Army. So I talked to two of my friends. We talked about it, and on a Sunday, and the next day we drove down to Detroit in his dad's car. And first place we came to was the Marine Corps. And we looked in, and here's these Marines in their dress blues, and so we said, let's try this. I said that. Hey, let's try this. And we went in, and they had to sign, fill out some stuff, sign some papers, and they had to strip down, and they gave you a towel to wrap around you. And they had a doctor there that gave you a quick physical. And I remember, what is this little thing going around there?
I don't know. I can't get rid of it.
That's all right. We're getting you all on this.
Okay. You're not seeing anything?
Yeah. Okay. So, I weighed 119 pounds, and I was 5'8". So I was really skinny. And so I was going through the physical thing, and the doctor said, okay, bend over and spread your cheeks. So I went.
But for the audience, Joe pulled the corners of his mouth and he bent over with his mouth open.
Anyway, so I passed the physical, and I took it to this sergeant, tough-looking old guy, and he looks at that, and he looks at me, and I'm standing there with a towel wrapped around me, and he says, well, you're not exactly what we're looking for, but the doctor couldn't find anything wrong with you, so I guess you're in. And so that's how I got in the Marine Corps.
And did your buddies get in as well?
Yes, one got in, Dan Ewald. He was accepted. He was 18. And another friend of mine, Kenny Slocum, didn't pass. He had a slight heart murmur. So he was so mad. The next day he went down and joined the Navy, and they took him the next day. He was gone within a few days, and we didn't get called up for a couple of months.
Wow. And so you went into the Marines and you saw action on Iwo Jima in the Pacific. And for the audience, Iwo Jima is a volcanic island north of Guam. It's about halfway between Guam and Tokyo. It's just this little spit of volcanic rock out in the middle of the Pacific, right?
Yeah, I think it was 5 miles long.
It was like 8 square miles.
8 square miles. And one end was the volcano, and where the famous flag raising
that's
took place.
A very famous photo. I know you've signed many a photo of that iconic image. I think some of our listeners may not know Iwo Jima, but they do know that iconic picture.
Yes, the famous flag, the most famous picture of World War II.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And it was funny, we had been dug in on the beach because we couldn't go inland because of the heavy fire for the first 3 days. And we moved up to next to the first airport. And I was digging in. We had to fill sandbags and dig these 105 artillery houses, these big 1-ton guns. And I was digging away, and this friend of mine says, "Hey, Hale," he said, "look up on the mountain. There's some guys up there raising a flag, looks like." And I said, "Oh, great. That sounds," I thought, "Gee, that's good because we've taken it." And then I never looked up. I just kept digging. And so I missed the famous flag raising, which took place.
Joe, what group were you in? What division were you in?
I was in the 5th Marine Division.
You're the 5th Marine Division of the Amphibious Corps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so you were on Iwo Jima. You saw action there, and then you got discharged in 1946.
Well,
was it 46? Yeah, I guess it was.
Yeah, I guess it was. I was after Iwo. We lost so many men and so much equipment. We were supposed to go to Guam and train there, but they sent us all the way back to the Big Island of Hawaii, and we retrained and re-equipped. And we were down at Hale, and we were loading our ships, and we were on our way to invade Japan, which would have been a real disaster. And they dropped the bombs, atom bombs. So instead of going in as invasion troops, we went to Japan and to Nagasaki. And I was in Nagasaki for, I think, about 4 months.
Wow.
We went right where we saw where the bomb had gone off, and the whole city was just flattened. And there was a lot of Catholics, Japanese Catholics. And there was a huge Catholic church, beautiful, had been a beautiful place, and it had just blown to pieces. You could still see it. It was a church. But a few miles from that was a district where they had the geisha houses. And when the bomb went off, it destroyed the church, but there was some hills between the blast and where the bomb went off. And so the bomb went over and destroyed everything except the geisha houses. So all the prostitutes were saved, and all the priests were destroyed.
Wow.
And we're saying, God does work in mysterious ways.
Yeah, wow. He certainly does. Holy mackerel. What? And so after you get out of the Marines, you got your high school diploma, from what I understand.
Yeah, I took it. Yeah, Dan and Ken and I they had gotten out just a little before I got out. And there was a teacher, Mabel Fox. She was one of our teachers, and she said, I saw her on the street after I'd been home a few weeks. And she said, Joe, next Tuesday, I want you and Dan and Ken Slocum to meet me in my room in the high school building at 5 o'clock. I want you to make sure you're there. You're going to take your GED test because you got to have a high school diploma. So we went and sat down and she passed out these tests. And she said, no, I got something to do for about an hour. So between the three of you guys, you ought to be able to figure this out. So we did, and we all passed with flying colors. So that's how I got my diploma.
And then you went on to art school in Michigan, right?
Yes, we went to Saginaw, Michigan, but for 6 months, for 1 semester actually. But he was more of a landscape painter, and I wasn't really interested in that as much as, I was just didn't really know what I was interested in, but I knew I didn't want to do that. And, I'd spent 3 years in the Pacific in the beautiful tropical weather. And that December, we had a big blizzard. It was just before New Year's. It started the end of December and the first couple of days of January. Nothing moved in the town. And I thought, my God, I can't take this cold. So I packed up and got out on the highway, and I started hitchhiking towards Chicago. And a truck driver pulled over, and those days you could hitchhike. It was safe. And he said, where are you going, son? I said, I'm going to California. I'm going to work for Disney. And where that came out, where it came from, I don't know. It just popped out of my mouth. So I hitchhiked to California, and I went to Chenard's and Art Center, and they were both booked up. And so I heard about Lucas Academy of Fine Arts. So I went there and showed Theodore Lucas some of my stuff, things I had done. And he said, we'll take you. So I went there for 2.5 years.
And just for the audience, Theodore, now you pronounce it Lucas or Lucas? Lucas. Yeah, Theodore Lucas was a very well-established portrait painter and landscape artist out here in Los Angeles. He was a plein air painter, and he started this academy, which actually didn't close until, I think, 1990. And how was it going? How was it going to school there?
It was very interesting because a lot of the fellows that went there worked for Pacific Outdoor Advertising, which in those days they had billboards all over town, all over the country, really. And he trained all the people for Pacific Outdoor Advertising. And then he did all whenever a studio did a picture about, Gauguin or whoever, some famous classic artist, and they needed a portrait of this artist on the screen did of, like, Olivier de Havilland or whoever. He could paint in any style. He was a fabulous artist.
And so he was able to create paintings for the movies.
Yeah, and so you start off with Lucas. You started off with drawing skeletons. You started from the very basic bones in the body, and you had to learn all the muscles and the names of everything, and it was quite a. And then you started working from nude models and went on from there.
Were there any other Disney artists that went through that academy?
I think that seemed like there was one, but I don't remember who it was now.
Yeah, because a lot of them went to Chenard, right?
Yeah, most of them went to Chenard, yeah.
Which is now Cal Arts.
Yeah. So anyway, after I finished at Lucas, I was working, even though I lived in the valley, not too far from Disney Studios, I just thought, well, they'll never hire me there. So I got a job at a silk screen shop in Culver City. And we did posters and wallpaper and a whole bunch of stuff. And I worked there for about a year. And then one day my car something was wrong with my car. It was an old used car. And I lived about 5 miles from Disney. So I thought, what the hell, I'm going to go. I just grabbed my portfolio and went over to Disney. And I walked into the office and into the guard shack out in front and talked to a really nice guy, a great guy. He was kind of the head of the security there. His name is O'Reilly. And I said, is there anyone I can talk to about getting a job here? And he said, well, do you belong to the Screen Actors, the Screen Cartoonists Guild? And I said, no. And he said, well, you got to belong to the Screen Cartoonists Guild because this is a union shop. They won't hire you unless you belong to the Screen Cartoonists Guild. So I said, well, I kind of started to pack up and leave. And I said, well, I'm going to go over. I'll join the Screen Cartoonists Guild. He said, well, no, you can't join the Screen Cartoonists Guild if you don't have a job at the studio.
That's the famous catch-22 about it, right?
Yeah, that's true. It was very true. They wouldn't hire you.
I was in the same boat many years later because you couldn't get a job unless you were in the Screen Cartoonist Guild, but you couldn't get in the Screen Cartoonist Guild unless you had a job. So it was really about having a studio say, we want to hire this guy. Then they put you into the Screen Cartoonist Guild.
That's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, he said, well, here, let me make a phone call. He called Andy Ingman. And he said, I heard him say on the phone, he said, I got there's a young fellow out here is looking, he wants to show somebody his artwork. And Andy didn't have anything to do at that particular time. So he said, well, send him on in. So I thought, great, I'll get inside the studio and see what it's really like and maybe see some real artists. So I went into Andy's office and had my portfolio, which is right over there in the corner. And I never showed you that. I'll show you sometime. Anyway, he looked through it and he said, yeah, we're starting Peter Pan. And he saw I could do, human type figures, which, Peter Pan was a real boy. And he says, yeah, I think we could use you. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. He says, and he told me about Peter Pan. And so I thought, oh, my God. And they set me down at a desk, and Johnny, forget his name, came in and showed me how to do in-betweens, flipping the paper and drawing the...
Was it John Lounsbury or...
No.
Johnny Bond?
Johnny Bond.
Johnny Bond.
So he gave me a drawing test, and I passed that okay. So the rest is history.
And so your first picture was Peter Pan?
First picture was, we worked a little bit on Alice in Wonderland. Just finishing that.
Finishing it off, yeah.
Yeah. And then we, in those days you would do, between features, they always had a bunch of shorts, Mickey cartoons and the 6-minute short subjects with Donald Duck, Goofy, or those things. So we did 10 or 12 of those between each feature at that time.
Yeah.
So that's how I started off doing Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. And
then you went into layout, is that right?
No, I stayed in animation, and Ward Kimball was doing some of these.
It's Tough to Be a Bird, and
those things.
Toot Whistle Plunk or Whistle Toot Plunk, yeah.
And so I worked for Ward, and he liked the way I drew. So I worked with Ward. We became good friends, and then one day I thought I was working away, and I thought, this really isn't Disney, the Kimball type stuff. I wanted to do the feature type. And so I went to, I was talking to Don Griffith about it, and he said, well, listen, why don't you go into layout? He said, you can he said, he can work with me. So I went and talked to Ken Peterson, and I said, Ken, I've been working on the Kimball type stuff, and that's not really Disney feature, and that's not going to last forever. I think it's kind of a fad right now. And I said, we've got the 9 Old Men, and then that are great, great, great animators. And then we got another, next to the 9 Old Men, we got about 12 or 15, what they call shorts animators, which were as good as damn near as good as the 9 Old Men. And then we had the top really professional assistant animators that worked for the nine Old Men and the other 9 Old Men. So I thought, geez, I'll be doing cleanup here for the rest of my life. So I said, I'd like to try layout. And I told them about talking to Don. And so they said, yeah. So then that's how I went into layout on, I think it was Sleeping Beauty. Yeah, it was Sleeping Beauty. That was my first layout. And
that was a very stylized picture, too, because
yes.
you were mentioning with Ward Kimball, during that time period in the 50s, you had the UPA-style cartoons, which were very, 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 very graphic cartoons, like Mr. Magoo and things like that. And it was Ward gravitated to those new styles. But it was a departure from the sort of classic Disney animation.
Yes, yeah.
And so you did layout on Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, I used to walk around a lot, and I always wanted to see what was going on in different departments. So I was walking on the 3rd floor one day on my lunch hour, and I looked in the room, and there's a fellow in there that was doing these really interesting paintings on, I think, Lady and the Tramp, some backgrounds. And I walked in, we got talking, and it turned out it was new. It was Ivan Earl. And I was looking at some of the things he was doing, and I said, you're going to make a lot of people envious when they see your work. And anyway, we became real good friends. And so when he was doing, they put him on Sleeping Beauty, he was doing the forest where the princess meets the prince for the first time, where she's dancing with the little animals and singing and all that.
Uh-huh.
And it was being laid out by Colin Campbell, and but it wasn't in the Ivan Earl style. Well, Ivan's style was easy to me; it was easy to do, and so I was doing some also. And he said, he went to whoever and said, I want Hale to do sequence 8 for me. I want him to do everything. And so he called me in and told me what he wanted me to do. And I said, great. And so I took all of Colin Campbell, which were beautiful layouts, and I didn't even think about keeping them. I threw them all in the trash. And so anyway, that was my first picture. Was Sleeping Beauty was
the first one that you were fully in layout.
Yeah, well, I did all the layouts in that particular sequence, and I worked with Don. I worked in the room with Don Griffith, and we became real good friends.
And did you go right on to 101 Dalmatians from there?
Yeah.
And when did you start working on the Wonderful World of Disney material, or was that sort of happening in between while you guys were working on the features?
Well, I was working with after Sleeping Beauty. I went to work with Wilford Jackson and Dick Humer, and we were doing a TV show. We did a couple of TV shows, and then Wilford Jackson had a heart attack, and he retired, and so they started working for Ham Lusk. I worked for Ham on a lot of
Wonderful World of Color.
Wonderful World of Color. For about 10 years, I worked on TV shows.
Little Ranger and...
Yeah, Little Ranger, Guide to Nature.
Joe, did you have much in the way of interaction at all with Walt Disney? Did you meet him, talk with him?
Well, I was in a lot of story meetings. Well, it was a story meeting with Wilford Jackson and Dick Humer. Putting together some shorts and making a Wonderful World of Color TV show out of it. And they got to a point where Walt didn't like what he saw. And so without really thinking, I said, why don't we do so-and-so? And so I came up with my idea, and Walt said, yeah, I think that'll work. And then he got up and left. And the next day, Les Clark came down, and I was working away, and Les says, hey, listen, Joe, I want to tell you something, and I don't take it the wrong way, because this is for your best interest. When you're in a meeting with Walt and you have an idea, save it till after he's gone, and then tell the director about it. Because if you had come up with a really dumb idea, Walt would have just ripped you to pieces. And he said, I'm telling you this for your own good. And I knew he was. Yeah. I was in a lot of meetings with Walt, and but I always sat at one side and I'd take notes or whatever. And I think once he said, Hale, you're being awful quiet. And I said, well,
That's awesome. I love those teachable moments that you had there, because that's a great lesson in life. Actually, it's a great life lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always nice to have somebody give you a heads up on things like that too.
Yes,
exactly.
Well, yeah, and I knew that Les Clark was telling me this for my own good. There was nothing devious about it. He was just saying, hey, Hale,
that's
if you
awesome.
want to stay here, you better learn to keep your mouth shut.
So, Joe, I think, you spent a lot of time in the animation department. Did you ever get involved with any of the Disneyland projects in the 60s? Did you ever? I know some of the artists would get pulled on to things for a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason Sleeping Beauty took so long to make was that Walt was really getting into Disneyland, the design. It was getting ready to open, and so people were doing all sorts of odd jobs. We had to design trash cans and shoulder patches and all that. And Ken Anderson was right across the hall from me at that time. And there was I don't know if you remember, there was a little, not much bigger than a big swimming pool. It was a circle, and there was a pirate ship, 5/8 scale pirate ship floating in the middle of it. Beautiful.
Yeah, down at Disneyland. It was off to the side of the castle where Fantasyland is. Yeah. And that pirate ship was a little restaurant. Originally it was called Chicken of the Sea.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was sponsored by Chicken of the Sea Tuna.
Yeah.
And Ken Anderson was doing a lot of design for the park, and they needed it in a hurry. So he came over and he said, hey, Joe, I got a project for you. And he said, I need to have benches and a eating area and, a little area for people to sit and rest and eat, and because we need something around the pirate ship. So I did some benches kind of based on coral reefs. And there was a skull. I put the skull rock in there. And then later that was all taken out. I think the skull rock is still there, but it was there for a number of years. But
they ripped all that out during the big Fantasyland makeover.
Yeah, actually the pirate ship was getting starting to rot away, and I guess they had to. Too bad. It was a beautiful ship.
Yeah, a portion of that ship is actually in the Peter Pan Flights ride now.
Oh, really?
When they did a refresh of the Peter Pan's flight, they actually during that whole refurbishing of Fantasyland that they did, they took part of that pirate ship and used it in Peter Pan's flight.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
So that brings us along, and I think Aljon, I'm so anxious to talk about the Black Cauldron because this year is the 35th anniversary. Joe Hale was the producer of that movie. He was at the top of the hill on that movie, and Joe, I know you've been talking a lot about it in recent months with interviews and stuff like that. But can you tell our audience when you first got involved with it, because it was quite a bit before the movie actually ever materialized?
I was working on, I had been working on live action films like Pete's Dragon and Bed Knobs and Broomsticks and
The Black Hole.
The Black Hole, yeah. And I had been working on live action for about 10 years. And the last one I worked on was Watcher in the Woods, and we finished that. And so I needed a new assignment, so they put me on the
Story.
Development.
The Black Hole.
The Cauldron.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a room by myself, and I really enjoyed it because I'd been 10 years with live action, which is really a lot of fun, but it's a lot of hassle too. So anyway, I would sit in there and kind of imagine the boy climbing into the castle, and so I was working on that sequence and really enjoying it. And I know there had been a lot of problems between the new animators and the old animators, and I didn't want to get involved in that at all. And so I was working by myself, really.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Can you talk? It's sort of that new wave of animators that were coming in from Cal Arts, and the nine old men and some of the people that had been there for decades were starting to get towards retirement, right?
Yeah. And I think...
was there friction between the two groups, or did they
I think Don Bluth and his group had left by that time. Yeah. So there was a lot of just problems.
A lot of chaos, I think, right?
Yeah,
because people didn't know what to do, and there were some experienced people had left that were trying to bring those new guys in and get them up to speed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, one of the animators came up and he said, a lot of the animators, they know about your work, and we would like we want to go to Ron and have you take over the picture from Art Stevens. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. I said, Art, I spent several years working with Art in the same room with Art. We're good friends. And I said, there's no way I'm going to take over his job.
Was Art actually producing the show, or?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So he was the producer initially.
He was in charge, and Art and I were very close friends. Mm-hmm. So anyway, finally, Ed Hansen had heard from Ron Miller that they wanted me to. I don't know if some animators had gone to Ron or what. Anyway, Ron called me up to his office with Ed Hansen and asked me if I would like to take over as producer on the Black Cauldron. And I said, well, no, not really. I said, I'm happy in story. And I said, I don't want to get involved in all the hassle that's going
politics.
On. The politics.
I don't blame you.
I said, I really don't want to do it. And so then a week or so went by, and then I got called up again and given the same pitch. And finally he said, look, he said, somebody's going to take over the picture. You're not replaced. Art Stevens is going to be replaced. So either, you take it or somebody else is going to take it. So I thought, well, Jesus, if they want me, I didn't have much choice. I just felt. Yeah. So that's how I got involved with it.
And did Art Stevens retire at that point?
Yeah, he did right after that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so now as a producer, were you still doing story development, and were you doing any artwork early on during the development phase?
No, I was just doing story.
Okay. Yeah. And,
I was writing it down.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't storyboards at that point.
No, I wasn't boarding.
Yeah. You were coming up with the script, so to speak.
I did the first one I did was the Terran climbing up and going into the castle where he's captured.
You wrote that sequence? Or
Yeah.
You worked on that?
Yeah, I wrote that sequence.
That's fantastic. And then it started to pick up steam at that point. Do you know what year Do you know what year it was when they made you the producer?
It was 1980, I think.
1980. Yeah. So it's still a couple more years of development before things really got. They were the most of the department was still finishing off Fox and the Hound. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so talk a little bit about once the production team started coming onto the project, because you were instrumental in bringing Andreas Deja in.
Yes. We hadn't really settled on any of the characters yet.
Design.
And so Ed Hansen came up with a portfolio and showed me, he said, this is Andreas Deja, a young German boy. And I looked at his work, and it was like he had that Disney DNA. His style was the Disney style. It was really weird. So I said, gee, hire this kid, And he said, well, he's in Germany. And I said, well, bring him over. So anyway, that's how Andreas got involved.
And Phil Niblink was already there because he came in from Cal Arts.
Yeah, Phil Niblink. Yeah.
And Glenn Keane didn't really work on the picture much, did he?
I don't know.
I think Glenn may have skipped over Black Cauldron.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, because he was instrumental, certainly, in Fox and the Hound.
Yes.
Yeah. But Phil Niblink and Andreas were the two supervising animators.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, talk some more about what it was like getting that picture together, because there was a lot of issues.
Well, yeah, it was the whole thing was just kind of a mess. There was one group wanted to go one way and another group wanted to go another way, and we had bits and pieces, and my job was, I can remember, is the frustration of it is just trying to get some sort of, I knew we had to get the picture out. It was costing a lot of money. And if I didn't, I had to get it going because the animators were coming off Fox and the Hound, and I didn't want to see anybody laid off. So it was trying to get this kind of thing organized. And that part of it is kind of a nightmare to me.
Yeah, and the story too was difficult because you're dealing with this series of fantasy books. There was like five books in the series.
Yeah, that's the first thing I did was read the books.
Yeah,
and then trying to. But actually, being the producer of that picture was not a very pleasant experience.
Well, and I think it's important for the audience to realize that in the middle of production on the Black Cauldron, the studio itself, the whole Walt Disney Company, was in the process of a potential takeover.
Yeah.
And there was a financier from Wall Street who thought the company was worth more in pieces sold off, and so that caused chaos in the board. Roy Disney had resigned from the board, and then engineered the White Knights, the Hunt brothers from Texas, to come in to take a stake in the company to help save the company. And all this is swirling around while this group of artists is trying to make a movie.
Yeah, and we had lost a lot of our top animators, and
it really was. It was a studio in transition at that point.
Yeah.
And then partway into the production, you had all these new executives coming in that most of them had worked over at Paramount. You had Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. Frank Wells had been an executive at Warner Brothers. And all these people come in and they didn't know their animation from their elbow.
That's right. Yeah. So the whole thing was just, I don't know. I don't know how I survived it, but I managed to somehow.
Well, it was trial by fire because it was my first picture. I came in 1984 at the very bottom of the Black Cauldron. I was an in-betweener in the effects department. So I remember what was going on at the studio at that time. And what were your thoughts when you were hearing some of this stuff?
Well, I was busy. I was trying to concentrate on picking up the pieces of the story and making a picture, I just wanted to get a picture made. And so it was, I don't remember. I know there was every day was a hassle, seems like.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine being around during that time with all that stuff going on. And you, Mr. Hale, dealing with the politics involved with, the new management coming in, one direction going one way, you going the other way, and you being producer having to reel in all of these cats in order to get this film made. I couldn't imagine just the amount of work you had to pour into it just to get through the finish line.
And then also, see, after Don Bluth had left with the bunch of animators, they didn't want to make that get any more frustration going with the animators, so they sort of said, "You guys this is your studio. You're going to be in charge. So do whatever you feel good doing." And they wanted to do. I'd go down in the A wing and to see one of the animators, and you'd see somebody standing on his head, and somebody seeing how long he could stand on his head. And so they were just the production was going nowhere. I kept getting the budget slip every week, and be another $100,000, and nothing was being done. And I was trying to, what do they say, gather wet cats, herding cats.
Herding cats, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so the production obviously did get going and it did get done. But then you had Jeffrey Katzenberg come in on top of the studio side of the business, and he had his own viewpoint on the story. And can you talk a little bit about that and some of the funny things that happened along the way, because he didn't understand animation at that point?
He came in and Katzenberg was, there was a book. I don't know if you ever heard of it. It's called What Makes Sammy Run? It was Bud Schulberg.
Okay.
It's about a young man in Hollywood and how he maneuvered around and managed to take credit for things he didn't do and didn't take blame for anything that went wrong. And that was kind of Katzenberg. In fact, a funny story is going back to Iwo Jima. I had that book. That's where I read it. It was on that ship going to Iwo, and I read What Makes Sammy Run, and then I gave the book to somebody else, and he loaned it to a guy named Sam Baranja from Vermont. And we were on the beach, and the bullets are flying all over the place and zipping by, and Sam crawls up to the guy that loaned him the book and says, "Hey, here, I want to return your book." And everybody thought that was hilarious in the middle of this.
He wanted to return it.
Funniest battle of this World War II.
He wanted to return it just in case, huh?
No time like the present.
I want to give you your book back.
That's interesting. You know, that's interesting.
So anyway, Katzenberg, he didn't really understand animation, but he wanted. Roy came back at the same time, and Roy wanted a job there. He sort of engineered getting Katzenberg and Eisner back, and he wanted a job there. And he talked to me about it, and he said, Joe, he said, I want to get involved in the studio again. And he said, I'd like to get a job here. He says, I come in every day, but I don't get a paycheck, and I don't have a job. And he said,
assignment.
And he said, Katzenberg doesn't want competition or something. Anyway, they didn't care much for each other, I don't think. So he said, I'd like to work with you and help me get, back in the studio. So I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So
I was going to say he eventually he was vice chairman of the company, but he was chairman of the animation department. He really saved the animation department.
Exactly. Anyway, so we set up a screening for Eisner and Katzenberg and what's the guy that was killed?
Frank Wells.
Frank Wells.
Yeah.
So we ran the picture. We got
work reels, right?
The work, yeah. And it was at night. It was at 7 o'clock, I think, we started running. And about a third of the way through, Frank Wells wasn't there. So anyway, they started it anyway. So he comes in with a big, huge bag of popcorn. And they're talking, the movie's going, and they're talking and eating popcorn, and I thought, oh, God, I wanted to stop and start over. And they, no, let's just keep it running. And anyway, Katzenberg said the next day, he said, cut 10 minutes out of the picture. And I said, well, what, 10 minutes? You want to look at it again and show me what don't you like about it? He said, just cut 10 minutes out of it. So I got with Roy, and Roy we tried to figure out where we could cut. So we'd meet every morning and run it on the moviola, and Roy liked to have a few drinks at night. And being with our heads together on the moviola, and after he had a night of drinking, that was a job in itself. But anyway, so we cut, I think it was 2.5 minutes, and we thought, well, that's not hurting it too much. So we set up a meeting with Jeff, and he comes into the sweat box, and he said, we're getting ready to run it. And he said, did you cut 10 minutes out of it? And I said, Roy, I think, said, no, we just cut 2.5, about 2.5. He said, I said 10, and he left. And here's what he was doing, according to Roy. He said, wants to let me know he's my boss. And I said, well, yeah. And he said, well, he has a contract, and I don't even have a paycheck. So we got our heads together, and we cut a few more minutes out of it. And then Jeff Katzenberg brought in a bunch of young guys. I don't know where they came from. And he cut 12.5 minutes, I believe. And it was never the same picture again. It's too bad.
But you know what? It's still I think, held up very well. Roger Ebert gave it a good review when it first.
Oh yeah, I got some. Actually, I got some. Yeah.
Yeah, and I rewatched it last week because I hadn't seen it in a while, and I thought it played very well. All things considered, with everything that went on to get that movie made, I thought it played very well. Yeah,
and there was it cost. I think it was.
They said $25 million.
Yeah, that's what they told everybody, but it was probably a lot more than that.
Well, then I heard later they said it cost $70 million. Yeah. But then I had a good friend in Keith Cheney in he ran the projection department. He told me later, he said, we were told to unload all of our charges onto the Black Cauldron because they're going to write it off as a loss. So all the departments, all the studio overhead that had budgets that they were trying to make look better, charged it all to the Black Cauldron because they were going to write it off anyway. So people that say it cost $70 million, well, that was, creative bookkeeping, really.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that wasn't the real cost of the movie,
No.
and certainly with the new management that came in, Jeffrey and Michael and those guys, I think they looked at the Black Cauldron as, this isn't our movie. We don't care about it, and they didn't want to put any more into it than was already spent.
Yeah, I remember talking to Card Walker about that, and I said, it was a better movie before they got their hands on it. And he said, well, do you ever think about the fact that they might not have wanted it to be successful in the first place?
Because of they didn't want Ron Miller to have, after they had booted him out, they didn't want him to have a successful last release.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that the real victim during that period was this movie, because it got no marketing support or anything when it was released. And I think the funny story too was that Jeffrey asked you for the outtakes on the movie, right?
Yeah. Can
you talk about that a little bit?
Well, that's it. You want to look at there. We don't have outtakes.
Well, yeah, I mean, for the audience, when you have a live action movie, you're usually shooting with multiple cameras. You have different angles on a scene, so you have a lot of footage to pull from to do editing work. With animation, you don't have that. You're animating scenes that have been laid out in a sequence. And there's no extra, so to speak. There's not another angle or whatnot. And Jeffrey was asking for the outtakes so that he could go into editing and see if he could recut the picture.
That is amazing to me. That is absolutely an amazing comment. But here's one thing I want to know, sir, and maybe Dave, you can chime in. But I've always wanted to find out that you talked, Joe, about the editing, the taking out of the 10 minutes. Do you know where that footage is? I think there's tons of Disney fans that are like myself who watch the Black Cauldron, love the movie. As Dave says, it still holds up. Where is the footage? And do you think if they find it, would we ever be able to see the footage that was?
It wasn't totally animated, was it?
Well, some of that footage I think was still in. Somewhere it was in story sketch, some was rough animation, some was cleaned up animation, some was dailies, color dailies.
Some was already in color,
Gosh, I would love to see that.
Well, the funny thing is...
Somewhere in the vaults there, all that footage is laying somewhere, But
the funny thing is that over the years, I've had people reach out to me and say, where's the missing 12 and a half minutes? Well, and I don't think people realize it wasn't just a 12 and a half minute chunk. It was bits and pieces from throughout the whole film to kind of tighten it up and get it down to a certain running time.
That's another question that's for you guys, because was Katzenberg just hell bent on keeping the runtime super short? Because the movie it runs 120. No, I'm sorry, 80 minutes, something like that.
80 minutes. Mm-hmm.
So was he just really hell bent on keeping it tight like that, or was there absolutely no wiggle room whatsoever? He said in his mind, animation needs to be this amount.
I think partly they wanted to make it less scary for little kids, because when we had audience reaction screenings at different points of the picture, and there would always, they would invite people from all around Burbank to come in and bring their kids to see a Disney movie on the lot, and I was always there. And there was always several mothers taking their screaming kids up the aisle and out of the theater.
Well, you talk
So
about,
they wanted to make it less scary. They wanted to make it for, more of a kid's picture.
right.
And the original intent was to actually age up the animation a little bit and scare the teenagers, right?
Yeah, well, that was the whole idea behind when we made the film that I had heard was that they wanted to make a film that would appeal to teenagers because teenagers wouldn't be caught dead in a Disney picture at that time. We were making these silly,
Yeah. And the G rating was also the kiss of death for the movie exhibitors, for the theaters, right? Because if they had a G-rated movie, they'd fill a couple of matinees, but they wouldn't bring people into the evening shows. Yeah. So
movies Hollywood was going through a change. Tastes had changed.
And Black Cauldron was the first PG animated Disney film to be released, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, speaking of a little bit scary, the Horn King is a great villainous figure. He's super dark, and I personally enjoy him. But what was it like? Maybe if you could remember, doing that type of character design with a I guess at that point relatively young Tim Burton. You guys remember working with Tim Burton at all in that film? What your thoughts were?
Yeah, well, yeah, Tim. I didn't know. Someone said Tim Burton has really got a unique design ability style. Yeah. He said, you should look at his stuff. So I said, well, okay, bring him up. And I put him in a room with somebody else. I don't remember who it was. And he started designing characters for the Cauldron. But they were great pictures, but they were so different from Disney that, like I said to him, I said, well, I love your work, but you should have been here on day one, and I'd give you a hand to do the picture. You could have done it whatever way you wanted. But, this is not the Disney style, and those characters won't work in the story that we're working on. So, I didn't appreciate his work.
He did have influence on the Horn King design, though, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he had an influence, yes. He did.
That's very cool.
And Joe, I'm just curious, what do you remember? I mean, do you have a fond memory from the Black Cauldron production at all? A particular incident? You don't have any fond memories, huh?
No.
No, he enjoyed his work. He enjoyed his work in story, and he was a great story person, very, very, very creative. And he really wanted to stay in story and contribute to the story. And I think maybe the storyline would have been better if he had remained in story instead of having to go in management, which he did not want to do at all. And then when Kassenberg came in, then it was like two heads bashing against each other, and Joe would not sit back and take any crap off Jeffrey.
Sure.
Therefore, Jeffrey hated Joe, and the feeling was probably mutual. But, Jeffrey wanted everybody to recognize him as the head, and he knew everything and do it my way or get out of the way. And Joe and he just locked horns, and that was it.
Well, we were in a meeting one day, and he was talking about how he cut 3.5 minutes out of the Spielberg's first space movies.
Close Encounters?
Yeah. And what was the one with...
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
I can't think of it. I'll think of it anyway. It sort of indicated that where's the one where
Steven Spielberg movie?
Yeah.
Was it E.T.?
Was that Aljon?
Was that E.T. before he left Paramount?
E.T.?
No, it was after
not Schindler's List. No.
No.
Well, anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, and I sort of called him on it. Said, you think those pictures, these were real successful? Like Star Wars and...
No, that was Lucas.
Lucas. Yeah, that's the one. I meant Lucas.
You meant Lucas.
Yeah. Anyway.
And go ahead, finish this. You called Katzenberg on this 3.5 minute cut. What happened?
Yeah. Well, he got upset because...
You challenged him.
I challenged him, yeah.
Yeah. I think it sounds to me like he just wanted to let everyone know that he was the boss.
Yeah.
And that was always the case throughout Jeffrey's career, is that he was always constantly in search of the accolades.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that goes back to your story, Joe, about the what makes that book you were talking about.
What makes Sammy
run? What makes Sammy run? That's right. It goes back to that book once again. I get it. I don't know, Dave. We're at that point where we have some questions from our audience.
I was good. Before we do that, we do have a couple questions from our listeners that they've sent in. But Joe, I did want to touch on the music because the great Elmer Bernstein did the score for the Black Cauldron. Can you talk a little bit about that and where it was recorded and what it was like working with Elmer Bernstein?
Oh yeah, he was very professional. He came in and we had. The assistant directors had taken bits and pieces of different scores from different movies, and we had a score behind it when as we were making it.
Sure.
And he didn't want to see it with that score, and I said, "Well, just it'll kind of give you a feeling because some of the music you'll find is music you've written for other pictures." And he said, "Oh, okay, go ahead." And he ran it, and but anyway. Yeah, he liked it very much, and he brought this girl over from England. If you remember in the score, there's a strange sound. Ooh.
Yeah. For the bobble, right?
Yeah. And she had some kind of a...
Oh, the theremin.
Yes.
Yeah. A theremin, yes. She did the theremin sound.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, he did a really good job. And one of the things that bothered me when Katzenberg was cutting the damn thing was he was cutting some of his music that I liked out of it also, and which didn't help.
Was it decided early on, Joe, that this film wasn't going to be a musical, the musical adaptation? Because... Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just always assumed that, we'd have a...
How about the special effects? I understand, Dave, because you were so involved in the effects, just like Joe was for many years over there at Disney. The visual effects, was it the first time Disney utilized that electronic animation, computerized animation, and was it decided early on to use that experimental type of animation in this film?
No, in fact the computer animation kind of came along after the picture was started, and the only computer animation we really used was for the boat when they were escaping from it.
The boat, and also the princess's bobble that followed her around. I remember we did that it was done on an HP desktop, and then in the effects department we had to tape the printouts onto animation paper.
That's amazing.
It was rather antiquated, but it worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
I have to say, go ahead, Joe.
Speaking of Elmer, let me show you something real quick here.
Okay.
Joe is now picking up his iPad and he's moving it to show us something on his wall, and we're getting over to it. Here we are. It is.
Can you see it?
No, you got to lower it, I think. We're seeing only part of a photograph. Nope, but now I'm seeing 2 frames. The edges are 2 frames. Right. I think you got to raise it up. Oh, there. Joe with his bolo on, his Mickey Mouse bolo.
And Elmer.
And move it over just a little bit further to the, yep, there you go. Now we see it. Yep.
Nice.
It's Joe and Elmer Bernstein. What a wonderful thing.
I love it.
Joe's got the baton in his hand. Elmer's got a big smile. That must have, where was the recording done, Joe? Was that done in Los Angeles or London?
No, it was done at, I think it was Universal.
At one of the Universal stages? Yeah. And I think at this point, why don't we go to a couple listener questions, Al John?
All right.
You've got them.
Let's do it.
Skull Rock Podcast answers your email.
All right, Joe. So we've got this question from Just Telling Guess. I think that's how I pronounce it. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. But he goes, who brought the Pride and Chronicles onto the radar at Disney Animation? And what aspect of the final film in the Black Cauldron are you most proud of?
So when were the books acquired at the studio? Do you know?
From what I understand, is Don Duckwall's wife worked in the volunteer work in the library, and she discovered the books and brought them home. And Don Duckwall, who was in management,
he was a production manager, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he brought them in and showed them to Wooly, and Wooly called Frank and Nolly up in Milt, and that's how they got started at the studio.
And they bought the rights.
The rights, yeah.
Okay. And the second part of that question, Al John, was
what part, Joe, are you most proud of for the Black Cauldron?
Well, I don't know. I liked it all, actually.
I think you're proud. You're proud of getting the movie done,
right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's an accomplishment. Yes.
I mean, honestly, it took a Marine, a combat-hardened Marine, to get this movie done because of all of the stuff swirling around that had nothing to do with the movie that was going on at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you have no idea.
That's real project management.
Have a little bit of an idea. I was so low on the totem pole at that time, but I could see it going on.
The bubbling cauldron. Yes.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you so much for being part of the show and coming on as our guest and having your lovely wife, Beverly, there. You guys have been married for now, I want to say almost 70 years.
No?
60? 60 years? How long?
We got married in 1965.
Oh, in 65. Okay. I thought you guys were married in the early 50s.
No.
How old do I look? No, I was a kid.
Oh, you look fantastic. But the lovely Beverly, you raised two sons. You had a more than 40-year career at
55.
Disney.
Oh, his 40-year career, yeah.
Yeah, and you've been married over 50 years. Wow. Yeah. I mean, holy mackerel.
Yeah.
You know, Joe, before I let you go, and Dave, I'm sorry, I've got to ask this one more question because Spencer is pinging me on Facebook. Spencer Wright would like to know, Joe, regarding an animated Disney film, can you please explain what the role of layout artist is and what your role was in the Black Cauldron, or how your role as a layout artist was different than Evan Earl's role in animation?
Evan Earl? That was Sleeping Beauty.
Yeah, that's right.
Out on Sleeping Beauty.
That's right. Sleeping Beauty. He was referencing Sleeping Beauty there.
Oh, well, anyway, what a layout artist does is you work. That's one of the reasons I really enjoyed layout was you work with the director and you have a lot to do with staging and you have a lot to do with the story. And you take you work with the director and you draw the background. And you draw the characters in the background. And for instance, if you're doing a long room and a character comes through a door and walks across the stage and picks something up and goes out another door, you draw the layout. It's all done in pencil. you have the drawing of the door open and closed and opened, and the character walking through and picking up something, and you design whatever the character picks up. And in other words, you draw the picture, and the animator takes that layout and your drawings of the characters, and they animate the characters, and then it's shot as a screen test in test camera in black and white, and you have the whole picture, the whole scene animated in pencil with the. And then you draw the back.
Yeah, and in some sense, you're a cinematographer when you're in the layout.
That's
department.
That's it.
It really equates.
You're art director, cinematographer.
Yeah, and you're helping with the staging by placing poses of the character along on the
That's
layout.
right.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like lighting director and blocking.
And the thing that's interesting is that when the picture is done and they show the scenes from the picture, nobody knows what a layout man does. All the credit goes to the background artist.
The layout man draws the backgrounds, and then like Ivan Earl painted backgrounds that Joe had drawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in Sleeping Beauty, they would trace that onto a illustration board, and then Ivan painted them.
Gotcha.
But whenever you see a picture from Sleeping Beauty, it will always say Ivan Earl.
Yeah, but it was based on one of your layouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to say we're the unsung heroes of animation.
Yes.
Nobody knows what a layout man does, and nobody really cares. It's when the picture's on the screen is what they're impressed with.
Well,
and that's always the way. And the one thing that I think is certainly worth mentioning is that and Aljon, you mentioned it briefly, lighting. The layout artist is also figuring out what the lighting is going to be, and oftentimes do tonal sketches. Yeah, I see that. That's Joe is showing us a story sketch.
Love it.
Or it's a color story sketch from Black Cauldron.
That's amazing.
Can you see
Wonderful.
that?
Yes, sir.
That's fantastic, Joe.
Oh,
absolutely fantastic.
Wonderful.
Anyway, Joe, thank you so much for being on. Beverly, thank you for being there as well. It was really wonderful to talk to you about your entire career at Disney, your World War II service to this country. You were part of the greatest generation that ever mobilized to win the World War.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
No
Joe.
disputes.
Hey, Joe, Beverly, it was great seeing you. I look forward to talking to you again in the future. Thank you so much for being on the Skull Rock podcast.
Thank you, guys.
How do we send me the information so I can access the podcast?
We will. We'll send you a link, and I will do that tomorrow via email, Beverly.
Hold on a minute.
Okay.
There's one more.
One more thing. Always one more
This
thing.
is a caricature.
All right.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a character. Now, who's
Dolly is now Jolie.
So
Dolly.
Joe is showing us a caricature of him as a fair folk.
That's awesome.
One of the sequences that was heavily trimmed and almost cut out completely from the film. All righty, Joe. Thank you. Thank you, Beverly. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Kristen, what is our travel deal for this week?
Our travel deal is that Disney Plus subscribers, which I'm sure almost all of you are, you can save 50% off third and fourth guests who are under age 18 on select Disney Cruise Line sailings.
Awesome.
So you will pay, of course, full price for guests 1 and 2, and then guests 3 and 4 will be half price. And it's going to be for select cruises on the Disney Wonder, the Disney Dream, and Disney Wish. You can book up to 2 staterooms with this offer, and it is going to be available now through June 13th.
Where can people email you for this great deal and, of course, other deals that you have, different offers, and of course the free quote.
They can contact me at themeparksandcruises@gmail.com.
Hi, this is producer Carolyn Bates, and you're listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Your attention, please. Now loading on track number 1 for a trip around Walt Disney's Magic Kingdom.
Skull Rock Podcast.
All aboard.
Your Main Street to the world of Disney.
And the incredible Joe Hale. What a great interview, Dave.
It really was, and I'm glad we were able to rerun this for our listeners, many of whom I don't believe actually have heard this interview, because, again, it was our first interview that we did in October of 2020. So, there you have it. I'm glad we were able to play it again and to celebrate Joe's life. And it was a life well led, and that's the amazing thing. He leaves behind, I think, an incredible body of work, that he participated in and was part of. And I would argue that The Black Cauldron is an underrated Disney feature that got caught up in the management change out that happened during that time period when Ron Miller left the company and Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, Jeffrey Katzenberg came in. This happens all the time when there's management change outs at these entertainment companies. Projects that were started under the old regime get the short sheet, as they say, they don't get their due. And I think that happened with the Black Cauldron. And I think more and more people today are discovering the Black Cauldron because there is a bit of a fan base for it.
100%. We'll go back and revisit it and, go back through Joe's amount of work. I mean, he's worked on so many different projects. And, of course, they all bring a smile to our face. This is a gentleman that had his life's work in animation and filmmaking. And it's great that at least we can revisit that work on Disney Plus, of all places. So go out there and check it out. Well, gang, once again, thank you so much for tuning into the show. We do appreciate it. Feel free to subscribe and like all of our shows. Go back through in the Spotify archive and check it out, if you will. Link is in the show notes. If you're finding us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and click that bell for notifications every time we post new content. We would appreciate it. You can also email us with those questions and comments as well. Dave at skullrockpodcast.com or Aljon, ALJON, at skullrockpodcast.com. Don't forget to check me out on Instagram. I do appreciate it. Aljon Go. You can also check out my other podcast with my host, Kristen, my wife, Dining at Disney Podcast. We launch every single week, as well as being aired on Sorcerer Radio at srsounds.com. A proud distributor of our program as well at srsounds.com. All Disney music all day long. Dave?
Well, Aljon, I'm going to let our listeners know that you're going to be flying solo next week because I'm going to be on the road.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing a presentation on my House of the Future book, Walt Disney, MIT, and Monsanto's Vision of Tomorrow, at Modernism Week out in Palm Springs, California.
Love it.
At the Annenberg Theater out there. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be followed by a book signing. And not only signing my House of the Future books, but also my Kem Weber mid-century furniture designs for the Disney Studios book. I'll be signing copies of that as well. And then the following weekend, Aljon, I am going to be in Nashville, Tennessee with you.
Yeah.
February 21st to the 23rd for the Animation You All Expo, which I can't wait to go to. It's going to be very exciting. And I got confirmation that Bob Weiss, the former president of Walt Disney Imagineering, will be coming to Nashville. He will be signing copies of his Ghost Dog novel as well as his Dream Chaser book. Both books. He's going to be signing copies at the Animation You All Festival. So, folks, you get a chance to meet one of the top Imagineers Bob Weiss, he was the president of Walt Disney Imagineering. He oversaw the building of Shanghai Disneyland. Yeah. And he's an incredibly nice guy. So, if you get a chance, come out to the Animation Y'all Expo in Nashville. I want to remind our listeners, my Tunes Behind the Tunes show is on Sirius XM, Disney Hits, Channel 133. February, we're featuring the Feed the Birds from Disney's 1964 classic, Mary Poppins. You can also check out a lot of my books at theoldmillpress.com, including my latest book, Find Your Happy Place, the 8-Step Guide to Boosting Your Creativity Through a Personal Retreat, winner of a gold medal at the Fire Book Awards in Texas. And folks, if you're looking to make a change for the coming year, check out that book, Find Your Happy Place. You can also go to davidbossert.com. There's all kinds of free stuff there. And with that, Aljon, I'm going to say go out and have a fantastic week. I'm looking forward to seeing you in person at the Animation Y'all Festival in Nashville, Tennessee in a couple of weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be in the same room together, the first time in 5 years that we've been doing this podcast. So anyway, go out, have a fantastic week, everybody. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you back here next Monday right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.